Good morning. This morning we'll be creating line graphs in Excel. So as you have this document open, if you want to click on the link, that will open up a link to already set up data, or you can proceed to the next slide, which is right here. Okay, you should have something that looks like this. So I want to start over here on the left-hand side, where we're going to put in our data, and we're going to look at this data. And we need something, in this case for a line graph, maybe time and a distance. So in my physics class, this is quite often what I use. I use a distance versus time graph. And so I have placed in some data. So if you need to pause the video, go ahead and do that. And punch in some numbers like this, or punch in your own numbers from an experiment. This experiment here was information where my students ran an electric car down a path. And every time a second ticked on the stopwatch, they put a mark, and they measured the distance it traveled in each time. And so now we're going to graph it. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is go up and click on Insert, and then you want to left click on Time and drag all the way down to your last distance value. And that should highlight that whole box. We've now told Excel what information we're going to be graphing today. And please note, I included the labels so they will come out in the graph. Okay, next slide. Next, what we're going to do is get right into creating the graph. And so up on the top of your Excel screen, you should have a button that looks a lot like this one, number 1. Okay, and that is an XY scatter plot. And if you click on the down arrow right next to it, you will get a drop-down menu. And you're going to be looking for this one. We're not going to connect our dots with a line because it's good to see that I have some random variance in my data set. Not everything in the world works out perfectly. And so you are going to always get some variation. What we're looking for in a linear fit is the best fit approximation. Okay. Before moving on to the next slide, make sure that your graph is selected. You can tell it's selected if it has the 8 dots around it. Okay, moving on to the next slide. Next thing, I've got a lot to do here. I'm going to make sure that number 1, design, is clicked and checked. Okay, I'm going to move over to 2, and I'm going to add a chart element. As soon as I add that chart element, I will get a drop-down menu, and at the bottom of it, it says trend line. I'm going to click on this and I'll get another drop down menu. And in my case, I like to do more trend line options. Okay. As soon as that occurs, you should get this menu over here. I think I just highlighted it for you to see. And so you will have these options. Make sure that graph is selected, the 3 bar graphs. And you're going to make sure that linear is selected in this case because we're doing a linear graph. And for me, for my students, it's important that they display the equations on the chart. Okay. And a la peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, you should wind up with something along this lines. Okay. You're going to want to go in and change your distance, your graph title. And what my students are interested in is the y equals mx plus b format on the graph, and then the r squared value. And then we'll go on and do exercises where we extrapolate where the toy car would be if I went 20 seconds down the road. And so I then have an activity where I grade them on basically how well they did it. And we go into the discussions of how do you get good data? What do you do to trust your data? And usually the simple answer is run more trials. Thank you, and have a nice day.